Hello, and welcome to Paid Metrics and Optimizations here at Perfect Search Media. We'll be going into the Google Ads interface and talking about how to find what you need there. We'll be talking about important metrics for PPC and particularly paid search. And we will be talking about different optimizations that can be made in the account and tools that we have available. The Google Ads interface has somewhat recently, in 2017-2018, undergone an update. And we have an image here of the most recent update of Google Ads interface. On the far left column, you can see all the campaigns in your account. You can also, at the top where it says all campaigns, you can click on that and choose to only see your search campaigns, only display campaigns, video campaigns, shopping campaigns, etc. So you can divide up by different types of campaigns. The second column in gives you all the different things you can do within the account and things you can get to, starting with the overview of performance, recommendations that Google has, the campaign level, the ad group level, the ad level, landing pages, keywords, audiences, demographics, placements, settings, locations, ad schedule, devices, and more. So that's the column that we used the most in the interface. Next in is usually a small graph at the top where you can choose two metrics to take a look at. In this case, we have cost per conversion and conversions highlighted. And this way you can see performance over time. And then you can see the divided up performance by campaign below that. Here, it's important to note the filter on your data. So just above the table and just under the graph, there is that little filter symbol. And right now we're filtering by all enabled campaigns, which means all campaigns that are currently active. You can also choose all but removed campaigns, which will show both enabled and paused campaigns, or you can choose all campaigns, which include enabled, paused, and removed campaigns. The circle with the blue, the blue circle with the plus sign in the middle, that is how you would start to create a brand new campaign. The icons in the top right over the table allow you to do different things with the table. So the first one is a search. So a search bar, you can search, for instance, part of a campaign name, and that'll come up. The second one is segmenting. So you can segment the data, for instance, most commonly by month or by week, by time. But there are some other segmentations. You can segment by type of conversion, for instance, or other segmentations to the data. You can also modify your columns any way you want it. So you can set up custom columns in your table. You know, if certain metrics are more important to you than others and you want to move them to the front of the table, if you want to remove some metrics altogether or add some uncommon metrics in, you're able to do that in the columns section. There's also the report section. And again, this is how you get to more common reporting. The download section, which will allow you to download all the data that's in the table, and a few other options as well. Another important thing to notice is what days you have selected for the data. So above the graph at the top right, in the white bar, is the days you have selected. Normally, when we're looking at reporting, we might be looking by week or by month. Sometimes we're looking at things like year-over-year numbers, and you want to make sure that your data, you have the correct dates selected for your data. At the very top, in the black bar, you have the account that you're in. So in this case, we're in the NYFA account, specifically the NYFA search account. It says that you're in the all campaigns. You're looking at all your campaigns. There's a search bar up there for convenience. And then there's a few other icons that we're going to go over in a minute, but mainly reporting and then the various tools in the section. You can refresh the page, you can get help, there's notifications, and then of course, which account that you're in. So exploring The columns, we already talked about that second column over from the left. So we can look at campaign and ad group level or ad level, keywords, etc. And then if you click on tools and setting, it opens up all sorts of different settings that you can look into. So tools from Google, like Performance Planner, Keyword Planner, and Ad Preview. Your shared libraries, like your audiences, your bids, etc. Bulk actions that you can do, like rules and scripts. Measurement, so how your conversions are set up, which is incredibly important, and your attribution as well. And then all sorts of other setups, user access, etc., and billing, which you'll rarely look into on our side. You want to really pay a lot of attention to settings in that far left column there. That tells you exactly how a campaign is set up from the settings standpoint. And then also, as we've already talked about, under tools and settings and under measurement, conversions. How are your conversions set up? Because that's really going to be the backbone of your data. So moving into some key metrics in PPC, some of the top ones that we're looking at, things like click-through rate. So this is clicks divided by impressions. So out of all the people who see our ads, what percentage of them click on the ads? This can range wildly, but really anywhere from like 0.1% all the way up to, if it's a brand campaign or a very specific campaign, can be up to even like 50% of people. Cost per click, otherwise known as CPCs, and you'll hear this often, but it is cost divided by clicks. So how much are you paying every time somebody clicks on your ad? In Google and in Bing search, that's when you pay. Some of the other platforms also mix in cost per impression. But it's important to know how much are you paying for every click on one of your ads. And this is, affected by many factors. It's affected by competition. It's affected by your quality score. It's affected by your performance. The third one is cost per conversion. This is found by doing cost divided by conversions, and this is really probably the most important performance metric for most of our clients. How much is a conversion costing them in ad spend? And a conversion can be something like a purchase on the website. It might be a lead form that was filled out. It can be even something like a content download from the website or a video view. It's going to really vary from client to client, but they're going to want to know how much are they spending for each of those conversions. So for instance, they want to make sure that they're not losing money over the long run. So if they have a product that has a profit margin, say of $30, and they're paying $50 per conversion in ad money on that, they're losing money. So this is very important to our clients and something that we really focus on. A conversion rate is very similar to click-through rate, but it's conversions divided by clicks. So out of all the people who click on the ad and go to the website, what percentage of them actually do the conversion action that you've set? And again, this can widely vary from a very small number, like 0.1%, all the way up to 50, 60, 70%. Sometimes it's over 100%. If you have more than one conversion set up on your website, so say, for instance, your company is a nonprofit association and you sell both memberships and online courses, somebody in one ad click might come to your website and sign up for a membership and buy 2 online courses. And that person would have a 300% conversion rate because they clicked on an ad once and they completed 3 conversions. So in those cases, conversion rate can actually be over 100. And conversion rate is more helpful to look at like week over week, month over month, and year over year numbers and keep track of trends rather than trying to compare between different clients. Search impression share is impressions for your ad divided by the total impressions available. This is a common metric in Google. And again, you want to know how many times your ads are showing compared to how much they could possibly be showing, which is by the number of searches. So say you sell toothbrushes and your search impression share is 50%. That means 50% of the people who search for toothbrushes are seeing your ad. The other 50% are not. So you definitely have room to grow if there's room in your budget and if performance is good. There's also room for your competitors to get into the field as well. Some clients are very specific about wanting very high search impression shares to beat out the competition, and they're willing to pay for that. And some are more worried about cost per conversion and performance. And so they don't mind having a lower impression share as long as they're making a profit. Some common optimizations we can make in accounts. So some tips, first of all, before we get to our types of optimizations. Start from the top down. So what is, out of your list that we're talking about, sometimes this might be keywords or other types of optimizations. What's spending the most? What's performing the best? And then you want to flip it around. What's worst performing from the campaign level? So you start from the top down, and then you get more nitpicky. You really want to think as above and below average. So you want to have those average numbers in mind, and you want to think, these are all above average, these are all below average, these are really, really below average or really above average, to kind of identify the highest impact areas. You want to understand historical trends and significance. So you want to make sure you're not looking at too small a time period or too big a time period. So, what's happening the last week versus the last 14 days versus 30 days versus 3 months. Looking over the last 5 years, that might be a little too long because Google and paid advertising as a whole has changed a lot in 5 years. Year over year might be helpful or it might not be helpful depending on your industry and changes that have happened during that time. And of course, your business may have definite seasonality. So, maybe it's not so helpful to look at 3 months ago, but maybe year over year numbers are better. If your business performs very differently around in the winter as it does in the spring versus summer versus fall, then maybe you want to be comparing year over year instead of, March to December. And then think back to those metric equations that we just talked about and what needs to happen to improve whatever the client identifies as their key performance indicator. KPI is what the client thinks is most important to them. As we talked about, a lot of times it's cost per conversion, but not always true. Sometimes it's search impression share. Sometimes the client just wants lots of clicks to their website. They don't care about conversion so much. Maybe they don't even have conversion tracking set up. And so they want to look at clicks. And so for that, we might be looking at click-through rate as our key performance indicator. But that will be identified by the client. We'll start with keyword level optimizations. These are the most common that we do the most often. We do these both when our campaigns are on any of the various machine learning bid types, like maximize conversions or target CPA. We can still be pausing poor performing keywords or dividing up the ad groups or campaigns in different ways. And of course, if you do have campaigns that are on eCPC or manual CPC bidding, then you'll want to be making keyword bid adjustments on top of that. So keyword bid adjustments is where you increase or decrease the actual monetary adjustment on the bid based on performance. And you want to think about consequences. So usually we don't want to adjust this too terribly much all at once. Kind of our rule of thumb is maybe 20 to 40% tops at a time, and then assessing by performance over a few weeks. You want to be considering the match type. So broad match and broad match modified bring in a big variety of search terms, which can be good or bad. Sometimes it'll bring in search terms that you haven't thought about yet and you don't have in your account and that perform well. And that's great. You want to go through your search terms report and you want to add those search terms as keywords. However, it may bring in some or a lot of irrelevant searches that have nothing to do with your product and just waste your money. So you want to be very careful with broad match especially, but also broad match modified, that you're reviewing them quite often. You're adding those irrelevant searches to your negative keyword lists. And then, as we've just been discussing, search term exclusions and additions. So any relevant search terms that are bringing in conversions, you definitely want to add them to your campaigns. And then anything that's irrelevant or wasting money or not performing, you want to exclude and make a negative keyword. Other types of optimizations you can do in the account. You can do bid adjustments on devices. So this can be computer versus mobile versus tablet. Computer and mobile are obviously the most used. Tablet has a very small audience. And then also, if you do have video campaigns going, like a YouTube campaign, TV screens is another type of device. So sometimes you'll want to bid up on computers because people tend to purchase on computers and maybe computer has a higher conversion rate. Sometimes not. Sometimes mobile will do better for your company. It's really looking at the data campaign by campaign and making small adjustments. And again, if you're on a machine bidding program like Maximize Conversions, like Target CPA, the algorithm should be taking these things into effect. So you shouldn't have to make large bid adjustments. However, sometimes you may still need to make very small bid adjustments. You just want to realize that the bid adjustments that you're making are layered on top of the adjustments that the algorithm is already automatically making. So you don't, usually if there's already machine learning involved, you don't want to make more than maybe 10 to 20% bid adjustments because it will have a multiplied effect. Location bid adjustments. So we want to look at our set locations. We normally set up our accounts with locations by cities or by states so that we can compare performance between them. And then we also want to look at, for instance, user location report as opposed to their set locations, because those can be different. And we want to make bid adjustments, often, for instance, Alaska, Wyoming, North Dakota may need to have a lower bid adjustment than states like New York, California, just because CPCs are usually higher in some of those more popular states, and there's more competition there, and honestly, there's a lot more people to buy your products there. You may have ad scheduling bid adjustments. So certain days of the week, maybe your product sells really great during business hours, so Monday through Friday, you want to have maybe positive bid adjustments, but then Saturday and Sunday, you want to be decreasing your bids or maybe even excluding your ads from showing on those days, depending on how performance is. And then hour of day adjustments, same thing. So, if you're only selling in the US, you want to consider those time zones. When are people awake? When are people actually making the purchases? Maybe during business hours is best for you, or maybe after people get home from work or before people go to work or during lunch hour is really great for you. And so those might be times for you to increase your bid adjustments. Your audiences. So your remarketing audiences for search, things like your customer match lists, similar to audiences, in-market audiences, affinity audiences, detailed demographics, life events, all the different types of audiences there are nowadays that you can layer onto search. It's a really good way to hone in on performance. So for instance, if you're a B2B company and you provide businesses with corporate wellness programs, and you pay employers when their employees meet their exercise goals, let's say, for instance, you want to make sure it's business people who work for large companies who are actually seeing your ads. You don't want to show for anybody who is searching wellness program or pay me for exercise or something like that. You want to make sure that it's showing, say, for the affinity audience of business professionals, or for the in-market audience of in-market for business services, or for a remarketing audience that's already been to your website, or people similar to your current customers, things like that. So audiences can be a very powerful tool in Google, and Google has been putting more and more weight towards them. So that's definitely something you want to look at for your optimizations. Other optimizations you can make, obviously optimizations to ads and ad extensions. Which ads are performing best? Why do you think they're performing best? Is there a test we can do to replace some of the lower performing ads? Budgets, do you have one or two campaigns that are just performing great, but are not at a high impression share? And then you have some campaigns that are not performing as well, that are spending a lot of money. Maybe you want to shift some of your budget to the really well-performing campaigns at a lower search impression share to get more impression share and hopefully get more purchases. And then you want to make sure, of course, that your settings are following best practices as much as possible. Some tools that we use here at Perfect Search to help us make our optimizations. We have things like our internal Perfect Search keyword builder. When making a new campaign or discovering new keywords, it helps us to concatenate and build out long-tailed keywords, which tend to have lower CPCs and less competition. That's a tool we have in-house. It's very handy, and it not only concatenates the keywords, but then it puts it into the different match types and allows you to match bids to them as well. We also use a tool called SEMrush, and that tool is very handy, especially for competitor research. So if your client has some competitors out there with a lot of advertising, you can do things like see which keywords they're bidding on, see what their search and display ads look like, see how much budget they're spending. Obviously, you have to take it with a grain of salt. The competitor research tools are not always 100% right. We've looked up some of our actual clients that we know the data on. Sometimes the competitor tools are a little out of date, and sometimes their data is a little off. So just be aware of that, but it can be a good place to start. And then our third tool is Optimizer. An Optimizer is a tool that allows you to do bulk optimizations on all the things we discussed, on keywords, on ad schedule, on locations. It has different programs where it runs the data, the performance data in each of those sections through their tools and identifies the highest and lowest performing in each. And then it makes recommendations. Hey, you should increase keyword bids here, or decrease bids on devices here, or exclude this or include this, or here are some new keywords you might want to try out that did well as search terms, or here might be some new negative keywords to add. It's a very, very handy tool, and because it works in bulk and it works across both Google and Bing, it makes a nice central, easy place to manage a lot of clients at once. Another big tool is obviously Google Ads Keyword Planner, and it's under the Tools and Settings section. And the Keyword Planner, basically, you can do two things with it. The first thing is you can find more keywords, so you can put in maybe 3 or 4 keywords that that are the core for your client, and then it'll give you all sorts of new keyword ideas. And it's a really good way to build out a new account. And then secondly, it can show you historical performance behind certain keywords and even predict what future performance will be. And it helps you predict what budget you'll need, what CPCs you'll likely see. If there's a lot of data in your account, it can even predict click-through rate, and it might even be able to predict how many conversions you'll get. Again, you have to take it with a grain of salt because it is, a math program and it doesn't know everything. But it is a very handy tool, especially when your client comes and says, okay, I want to, start a new campaign on online classes for acting. How much budget do I need for the US? And how much budget should I have for India? And how much budget should I have for South Africa? And so this way you can go, okay, online classes for acting. Well, I got that keyword. Let me put it into Keyword Planner and let Google suggest a whole bunch of other keywords around that. And then we'll put it into the forecaster tools, see historically how many searches there have been in these different locations, what CPCs have been, what budget we should need, etc. And then the last, of course, being Google Analytics. Google Analytics has a lot of data on organic keywords, which can be very helpful when building out paid campaigns. So you can see what keywords are triggering the organic listing of your client's site, and then how well those are performing. And you should also have the same conversion set up in Google Analytics, so you can track performance not only within the platforms, but all together. So Google Analytics will track Google performance, Bing performance, Facebook, LinkedIn, every platform you can think of, as long as it's set up correctly. So it's a great way to look at optimizations as a whole over many platforms as well. Thank you for listening in on our talk about paid metrics and optimizations.